But Satan's pride and Satan's desire for independence from God spread to others in the angelic world and then to the human race when he tempted Adam and Eve in the Garden of Eden. Here in Genesis 3, you can trace the very root of man's sin to pride and a desire to be independent from God. Just like Satan had pride, and Satan wanted to be independent from God, you find the same scenario in Genesis chapter 3 with Adam and Eve. It was pride that was the root of the sin. It was their desire to be independent from God. And no doubt you remember the command that God gave to Adam. Look at it in Genesis 2, verse 17. But of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, thou shalt not eat of it. For in that day that thou eatest thereof, thou shalt surely die. Now, let me reemphasize, God is the one who makes up the rules, right? That's what you're seeing here in Genesis chapter 2, verse 17. You are seeing the law of God. God has established what is right and what is wrong. And he says to Adam, he says, I want you to understand that you can eat of all of these other trees. And we have no idea how many trees were in the garden. Maybe there were 100 trees in the garden. 99 of those trees, Adam was free to eat of the fruit. But of the one tree we see here, of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, that was forbidden fruit. He was not allowed to eat of that fruit. Now, what is God establishing here? He is establishing that He is the one who makes up the rules. Amen. God is saying, I am God, and Adam, you are not God. And you have to live your life according to the rules that I have established. If you abide by my rules, my boundaries, my parameters, everything is going to be great. But if you violate, if you disregard my rules, my law, my parameters, my boundaries that I've established, then the consequences are going to be bad. Now, many people read Genesis 2 and verse 17 and they ask this question, why would God put a forbidden tree in the garden anyway? That's where they get hung up. They just don't understand. Why would there be, let's say 100 trees, and we don't know the exact number, 100 trees, 99 trees that he could eat the fruit of, but one tree? Why would God put that one tree of the knowledge of good and evil that had the forbidden fruit on it? Well, I believe, and this is just my own personal opinion, but I believe the very presence of the tree was a constant reminder of the creator-creature distinction that we have been talking about. You see, the forbidden tree reminded Adam and Eve that they couldn't just do whatever they wanted to do. I don't know how many times a week they passed that tree, but every time they passed that tree, they were reminded when they saw the tree, they said, now that's the tree that God said we cannot eat of the fruit thereof. And so there was that distinction. God is the creator. He is the one who has created us to have a relationship with Him. And He has established the law. He has established what is right and what is wrong. And He has told us that we cannot eat of the tree of the knowledge of good and evil. You see, they were reminded that they were limited, created beings who owed their absolute obedience and loyalty to their Creator. But go to chapter 3. Satan had tried to make himself equal with God in eternity past, and it failed. He's defeated. He is judged. He's thrown out of heaven. But now he tries the same tactic with Eve. I want you to look at Genesis 3 and verse 5. Genesis 3 and verse 5. For God doth know that in the day ye eat thereof, then your eyes shall be opened, and ye shall be as gods, knowing good and evil. Now, what is Satan promising Eve? Satan was promising Eve God-like status that would erase the creator-creature distinction. That tree, the tree of the knowledge of good and evil, every time Adam walked by that tree, every time Eve walked by that tree, they were reminded that they were created beings and that Creator God is the one who has established the rules and the boundaries. And He has said, I have told you you are not to eat of this tree, or the consequences will be bad. Well, what does Satan do? Satan comes along and he says, oh, he doesn't want you to eat of that tree because he knows that you will become like God. You see, Satan was saying to Eve, there's no reason why God has to be high up there while you're low down here. By eating this fruit, you can erase the distinction between you and God. You can be equal with God. And at that moment, Eve bought the lie and sinned. Pride and the desire for independence were at the very root of her sin and Adam's sin. Now, when Adam ate of the forbidden fruit and sinned against God, something very, very important happened that affects even to this day you and me. Because I know we're right here in the very first book of the Bible. It represents thousands of years ago. But I want you to know what took place in Genesis chapter 3 has an effect on you and me today. You say, why is that? What does this story have anything to do with me? Adam's sin was imputed to the whole human race. So what do you mean by that? Well, let me read a verse. Romans 5, verse 12. Wherefore, as by one man sin entered into the world. Who is that one man? Adam. You don't have to be a rocket scientist to figure out that Paul here is referring to Adam. And God is saying here in His Word that by one man, by Adam, sin entered into the world, and death by sin. We'll talk more about that next week. And so death passed upon how many men? Are you included in all men? We are, aren't we? It means all humanity, for that all have sinned.